My name is Harper, and for the longest time, my life felt like a neatly folded napkin. Predictable, comfortable, maybe a little plain, but sturdy. I was the wife who packed the lunches, remembered the anniversaries, and waved goodbye from the porch swing as my husband, Mark, headed off on yet another business trip. We had a routine, a good one, or so I thought. Mark traveled a lot for work, always had, and I was used to it. He'd tell me about the cities, the meetings, the clients, and I'd listen, asking questions, making him feel like I was right there with him. This particular trip was a big one, a potential deal that could really propel his career forward. He was heading to Miami, a city I'd always dreamed of visiting, but somehow, life, or maybe just our routine, had always gotten in the way. This time was no different. He packed his suitcase, kissed me goodbye, and promised to call every night. I went back inside our quiet house, ready for my usual week of solo dinners and catching up on my shows. But then, something shifted. Maybe it was a sudden impulse, a tiny voice in my head whispering about breaking the routine, about seizing a moment. Mark had mentioned the hotel he was staying at, a fancy place downtown, one he said was reserved specifically for clients on this high-stakes deal. It was a Thursday afternoon, 2 days into his trip, and the idea just bloomed fully formed in my mind. What if I surprised him? What if I just hopped on a plane and showed up? It felt wild, exhilarating. I pictured his face, the shock, the smile. We hadn't done anything spontaneous in years. It felt like just the thing we needed. So I did it. I booked a last-minute flight, found a cheap hotel room nearby just in case my surprise wasn't welcome or convenient, and packed a small bag. I didn't tell a soul. It was my little secret adventure. The flight was uneventful, a blur of anticipation and nervous excitement. I kept picturing the moment I'd see him. Would he be in the lobby? Would I have to call his room? How would I even explain showing up out of the blue? I got to Miami in the late afternoon, the air thick and humid, a stark contrast to the crisp fall weather I'd left behind. I checked into my small hotel, left my bag, and then, taking a deep breath, I walked the few blocks to Mark's hotel. It was even grander than I'd imagined, all gleaming glass and polished marble. My heart was pounding in my chest, a mix of nerves and giddy anticipation. I smoothed down my dress, took another deep breath, and walked through the automatic doors. The lobby was hushed, luxurious. Soft music played, and the air smelled faintly of something expensive and floral. I approached the front desk, where a woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a warm smile was assisting a guest. I waited patiently, rehearsing what I would say. "Hi, I'm here to surprise my husband, Mark." Simple enough. When it was my turn, the receptionist looked up, her smile widening slightly. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice smooth and professional. "How may I help you?" "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "I'm here to see my husband, Mark. Let's make up a last name for Mark, something common like Miller. Mark Miller. He's staying here on business. I wanted to surprise him." The receptionist's fingers flew across her keyboard. She glanced at her screen, then back at me, her smile unwavering, maybe even a little brighter. "Ah, yes, Mr. Miller. We were expecting you, ma'am." My brow furrowed slightly. "Expecting me? Oh no, he doesn't know I'm here. It's a surprise." She chuckled softly, a pleasant sound. "A lovely surprise, then. Mr. Miller made arrangements for your arrival." She turned her screen slightly towards me, and my eyes widened. It wasn't just a standard reservation, it was something else. My name was on it, Harper Miller, and next to it, not just a room number, but something that made the blood drain from my face. She looked back at me, that same bright professional smile still in place. "Your presidential suite awaits, ma'am." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. My presidential suite? Mark had booked a presidential suite, and he was expecting me? But he hadn't said a word, not a single word. He just said he was staying at this hotel for his business trip. He hadn't mentioned anything about me joining him, let alone in a presidential suite. My mind reeled. Why the secrecy? Why the elaborate setup without telling me? Was this some incredibly over-the-top, misguided romantic gesture? Or was something else going on? The receptionist's smile, which had seemed so friendly a moment ago, suddenly felt knowing, like I was walking into something I didn't understand. My voice felt thick as I managed to ask, He booked this for me? He knew I was coming?" "Yes, ma'am," she confirmed, her smile never faltering. "All arranged. He checked in yesterday. Said you'd be arriving today. It's all ready for you." "He checked in yesterday? And told them I'd arrive today?" That meant he'd planned this before he even left, before I'd had my spontaneous impulse to surprise him. He'd planned for me to be here, in a presidential suite, and hadn't said a single word. The surprise wasn't mine for him. It was supposed to be his for me. But why keep it a secret? Why not just tell me? "Harper, I've booked a suite for us in Miami. Why don't you join me?" That would have been the normal thing to do. This felt off. It felt deliberate. And standing there in that opulent lobby, hearing those words, "Your presidential suite awaits, ma'am," when I was expecting to maybe just meet him for dinner, felt less like a romantic surprise and more like the first page of a story I didn't know I was in. My mind raced through every possible explanation, every scenario, and none of them quite fit. Why lie by omission? Why the grand gesture hidden in secrecy? What was going on? What would you have thought in that moment? Let me know below. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the receptionist still smiling, the keycard waiting on the counter. Everything I thought I knew about this trip, about Mark, about us, suddenly felt shaky. This wasn't the simple surprise visit I'd planned. This was something else entirely, and I had absolutely no idea what it was. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the receptionist still smiling, the key card waiting on the counter. Everything I thought I knew about this trip, about Mark, about us, suddenly felt shaky. This wasn't the simple surprise visit I'd planned. This was something else entirely, and I had absolutely no idea what it was. My hand trembled a little as I reached for the key card, the plastic cool against my skin. I mumbled a "thank you," my voice feeling foreign and thin. The receptionist just smiled wider, like this was the most normal thing in the world, like people showed up unannounced expecting a quick dinner date, only to find a presidential suite waiting for them every single day. I wanted to ask her a million questions. Where was Mark? Had he checked in already? When? Why? But the words wouldn't come. My throat felt tight, and my mind was still trying to catch up with the reality of the situation. I turned away from the counter, the heavy key card in my hand, and walked towards the elevators. Each step felt weighted, like I was moving through water. The lobby, moments before a place of hopeful anticipation, now felt like a stage set for a play I hadn't rehearsed. I pressed the up button, the brass doors sliding open with a soft chime. I stepped inside, alone, the doors closing behind me, sealing me in a small, silent box as it began to ascend. The numbers on the display climbed higher than I expected. Presidential suites weren't usually on the lower floors. The silence in the elevator was deafening, amplifying the frantic thoughts bouncing around my skull. Was this a grand romantic gesture gone spectacularly wrong in the execution? Was he planning some huge surprise inside? Or was this something else entirely? Something less romantic? The thought sent a chill down my spine. The elevator dinged, the doors opening onto a floor that felt different immediately. It was quieter, the hallway carpet thicker, the lighting softer. There was only one door visible at the end of the hall. Mine, I assumed. The keycard felt heavy in my hand again as I walked towards it. My heart was pounding now, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. What was I about to walk into? I swiped the card, the light turning green, and the lock clicked. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open. The air inside was cool and still, carrying a faint, luxurious scent I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just a room. It was an apartment. A massive, sprawling apartment. The door opened into a large foyer, marble floors gleaming under soft, recessed lighting. To my left, a spacious living area unfolded. Plush sofas, elegant chairs, a large coffee table, a massive flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. Beyond that, through a wide archway, I could see a formal dining room with a table set for 8, maybe 10 people. To my right, a hallway stretched out of sight, presumably leading to bedrooms. Large windows lined the far wall, offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline and the ocean in the distance. The sheer scale of it was overwhelming. This wasn't just a suite. It was an entire floor, or at least a significant portion of one. And it was completely empty. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning. "Mark?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper in the vast space. No answer. I walked further into the living room, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I set my small overnight bag down gently near a sofa, feeling utterly out of place. I had packed a change of clothes and my toothbrush, expecting maybe a night in a standard hotel room, or even just dinner. I hadn't packed for this. I walked over to the windows, gazing out at the view. It was stunning, truly magnificent. But I couldn't appreciate it. My mind was a whirlwind. Why this? Why here? Why without telling me? I pulled out my phone again. Still no new messages from Mark. The last one was from yesterday, a simple, "Landing now, talk soon." That was it. No mention of a presidential suite, no mention of a surprise, nothing about me joining him. I scrolled through our recent message history, looking for any clue, any hint I might have missed. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Our conversations had been normal, about work, about our day, about trivial things. There was no indication that he was planning something like this. I tried calling him again. It went straight to voicemail. Again. This was unusual. Mark always answered his phone, or at least texted back quickly. Unless he was in a meeting. But even then, he'd usually send a quick message. Being unreachable for this long felt wrong. I started walking through the suite, needing to do something, anything, to process the strangeness of it all. I explored the dining room, the pristine table setting looking untouched. I peeked into the kitchen, a state-of-the-art space that looked like it had never been used. Then I ventured down the hallway. It led to multiple rooms. The first was a smaller sitting area, perhaps a study. The next was a guest bathroom, impeccably clean. Then I found the bedrooms. There were 2 guest bedrooms, each large and beautifully furnished, with their own ensuite bathrooms. And finally, at the very end of the hall, the master suite. It was even bigger than the others, with a king-sized bed, a separate sitting area, a walk-in closet that was bigger than my first apartment, and a bathroom that looked like a spa. A huge soaking tub, a separate rain shower, double vanities. It was opulent, extravagant, and completely empty. There were no suitcases, no clothes in the closet, no toiletries in the bathroom. It was as if the suite had been prepared for someone, but they hadn't arrived yet. Or maybe they had, and then left. But why would Mark book this incredible suite, presumably for us, and then not be here? And not tell me? The more I saw of the suite, the more confused I became. This wasn't just a nice hotel room, this was a statement. A very expensive, very elaborate statement. But what was it saying? Was it meant to be a grand romantic gesture, a way to sweep me off my feet after being apart for a few days? If so, why the secrecy? Why put me in this position, showing up at the hotel lobby with no idea what was happening? It felt less like a surprise and more like a test, or worse, like a cover-up. My mind went to dark places. Was he meeting someone here? Was this suite booked for him and someone else, and I had somehow stumbled into the middle of it? No, that couldn't be right. The receptionist said, "Your presidential suite awaits, ma'am." Singular, mine, or ours, presumably. But if it was ours, where was he? Why wasn't he here waiting for me, or at least answering his phone? I walked back into the living room and sank onto one of the plush sofas, the cushions soft and yielding beneath me. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, a combination of the travel, the confusion, and the sheer emotional weight of the situation. I looked around the luxurious space. It was beautiful, undeniably, but it felt cold and impersonal without Mark here. It felt like a cage, albeit a gilded one, that I had been locked in without explanation. I picked up my phone again, staring at Mark's contact name. Should I call his work? His colleagues? No, that felt too dramatic, too soon. Maybe his phone had just died. Maybe he was in a meeting that had run long. Maybe there was a simple, logical explanation for all of this. I wanted to believe that, desperately. But the knot in my stomach was tightening, and the silence of the presidential suite felt less like anticipation and more like absence. I was here, in this incredible place, completely alone, with no idea why or what was supposed to happen next. And the longer I sat there in the silence, the more the questions gnawed at me. What was Mark doing? Where was he? And what was the real reason he had booked this suite? I wanted to believe that, desperately. But the knot in my stomach was tightening, and the silence of the presidential suite felt less like anticipation and more like absence. I was here, in this incredible place, completely alone, with no idea why or what was supposed to happen next. And the longer I sat there in the silence, the more the questions gnawed at me. What was Mark doing? Where was he? And what was the real reason he had booked this suite? I finally got up off the couch. My legs felt a little shaky. I walked over to the window. It was floor-to-ceiling glass, looking out over. I wasn't even sure what city I was in anymore. It was nighttime now. The city lights spread out below like a glittering, endless carpet. It was a breathtaking view, the kind you see in movies, the kind you share with someone special, pointing out landmarks, making plans. But I was alone. Just me and the silence and the twinkling lights that felt miles away. I turned back to the room. It was vast. There was the living area I was in, with multiple couches and armchairs, a huge flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, a coffee table that looked like it weighed a ton. Beyond that, I could see a formal dining area with a table set for 6. 6? Why 6? Just another layer of weirdness. There was also a separate kitchen area, small but fully equipped, and a guest bathroom off the main living space. I walked towards what I assumed was the bedroom. It was another huge room, dominated by a king-sized bed that looked impossibly soft. More floor-to-ceiling windows with a slightly different view of the city. A walk-in closet that was bigger than my first apartment. And a bathroom. Oh, my word, the bathroom. It was like a spa. A huge soaking tub, a separate walk-in shower with multiple shower heads, double sinks, marble everywhere. There were fluffy robes and slippers laid out on the counter. It was all incredibly luxurious, incredibly excessive, and incredibly empty. I went back to the living room and picked up my phone again. Still no messages from Mark. I tried calling him again, straight to voicemail. The subscriber you are trying to reach is unavailable. The automated voice was maddeningly calm. I hung up. What else could I do? Call his office? No, not yet. What would I even say? Hi, is Mark there? He booked me a presidential suite in a city I wasn't supposed to be in and now I can't reach him? That sounded completely insane. Maybe I should call the front desk again. Ask if Mark had checked in earlier, or if he had left a message. But what if asking questions like that somehow messed up whatever this was? What if it was a surprise? A really, really elaborate, poorly communicated surprise. Mark wasn't usually this secretive, but maybe for something this big, this over the top, he'd wanted it to be a total shock, but leaving me completely in the dark, unable to reach him. That didn't sound like him at all. He knew how I worried. I paced the living room, one end to the other, back and forth. My mind was racing. Was he okay? Had something happened? Had he just gotten tied up? Or was this something else? Something less innocent? My imagination started to go to dark places. Affairs? Financial trouble? Some kind of legal issue he was trying to hide? No, that was crazy. That wasn't Mark. The Mark I knew was steady, reliable, maybe a little predictable, but in a good way. This whole situation was the exact opposite of predictable. I stopped by the dining table. I ran my hand over the smooth, polished surface. 6 chairs. Was he planning to meet someone here? Multiple people? For dinner? That seemed even stranger. Why wouldn't he have told me? Hey, honey, I booked us a presidential suite in Mystery City and invited 5 other people for dinner. Hope that's cool. No, that wasn't it. I went back to the couch and sank down onto it. I felt exhausted, confused, and a little bit scared. Scared of the unknown, scared of what might be happening, scared of what this might mean for us. Was this some kind of test? Some kind of statement? I had no idea. I looked at my luggage near the door, my small suitcase and backpack. Everything I needed for a few days, packed for a trip to see his family. Now I was here, in this palace, with clothes meant for casual family gatherings, not whatever fancy event might happen here, if any event was even planned. I noticed a tablet on a small stand next to the couch. It looked like it was probably linked to the hotel services. I picked it up. The screen lit up. It had options for ordering room service, requesting housekeeping, information about the hotel's amenities. I scrolled through it. It confirmed I was in the presidential suite. No mention of Mark's name anywhere, just mine. That was weird. If he booked it, wouldn't his name be on it too? Or maybe he specified just my name for the check-in. I clicked on room service. The menu was extensive and expensive. My stomach rumbled. I hadn't eaten since that sad airport sandwich. But ordering a gourmet meal for one in a presidential suite felt wrong. Like I was accepting this reality before I understood it. I put the tablet back down. I needed information, not a fancy burger. I considered calling the front desk again. Maybe I could just say, "Has Mr. Mark Evans checked in yet?" and see what they said. But what if they said no? What if he hadn't shown up at all? That thought sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I decided to wait a little longer. Maybe he was just running late. Maybe his flight was delayed, and he couldn't call. But he knew I was flying in. He knew I'd be expecting him. He wouldn't just leave me hanging like this without a word. Not unless he couldn't. I walked over to the minibar area. It was fully stocked, of course, with tiny bottles of liquor, wine, expensive snacks. I wasn't much of a drinker, but I was tempted to pour myself something strong just to calm my nerves. I resisted. I needed a clear head. I sat back on the couch, pulling my knees up to my chest. The silence in the suite felt heavier now. The initial awe had worn off, replaced by a deep unease. It felt like I was waiting for something to happen, but I had no idea what. And the person who was supposed to tell me was unreachable. Hours seemed to pass. I tried Mark's phone periodically. Always voicemail. I checked my email. Nothing from him. I scrolled through social media aimlessly, trying to distract myself, but my mind kept circling back to the same questions. Where was he? Why was I here? The view from the window changed subtly as the city lights seemed to settle into their nighttime pattern. Traffic sounds were muffled by the height and the expensive windows. I felt completely disconnected from the world outside, trapped in this luxurious bubble of uncertainty. I thought about calling my best friend, Sarah. But how would I even begin to explain this? "Hey, Sarah. So Mark sent me to a random city and booked me a presidential suite, but he's not here and I can't reach him?" She'd think I was making it up, or that I was in some kind of trouble, which I guess I potentially was. I decided against calling anyone for now. I needed to figure out what was going on first. I needed answers from Mark. But how was I going to get them if he wouldn't answer his phone? I considered going back down to the lobby. Maybe talk to the receptionist again. But what if she just gave me the same polite, unhelpful smile? What if she knew something she wasn't telling me? The thought felt a little paranoid, but in this situation, it was hard not to feel that way. The suite was beautiful, yes, but it felt less like a gift and more like a puzzle box I couldn't open. Every perfect detail just highlighted the central missing piece. Mark. His absence was a physical weight in the room. I finally got up and walked towards the bedroom again. Maybe I should just try to sleep. Maybe everything would make sense in the morning. But the thought of closing my eyes in this strange, silent place, not knowing where my husband was or why he had left me here, felt impossible. My mind was too active, too worried. I stood by the huge bed, looking at it. It looked inviting, but the thought of getting into it alone, in this suite Mark had booked, was unsettling. It was supposed to be for both of us, wasn't it? Or was it? The uncertainty was the worst part. Not knowing if this was a romantic gesture gone wrong, a terrible accident, or something far more sinister. I walked into the massive bathroom. I turned on the faucet in the soaking tub. The water was hot, steaming. Maybe a bath would help. Help me relax, help me think, or maybe just help me escape for a little while. I watched the tub fill, the sound of the running water the only noise in the quiet suite. It felt like the most normal thing I had done since I arrived. Fill a tub, take a bath. A simple act in a wildly complicated situation. I just hoped that by the time the water got cold, I would have some kind of answer, any answer. The water felt good, surprisingly good. It was hot, almost too hot, but the heat seemed to soothe the tension that had coiled itself around my shoulders and neck. I sank down into the bubbles, letting my head rest against the cool porcelain. The silence of the suite was still there, but the water muffled it slightly. For a few minutes I just floated, trying to clear my head. It was impossible, of course. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark's face, the quick kiss he'd given me, the way he'd just walked away. Where was he? What could possibly be so important that he would leave me in a strange hotel, without a word, without even making sure I was checked in properly? The receptionist had seemed so certain, so welcoming, but her words about the presidential suite and my name felt less like a pleasant surprise and more like part of a plan I wasn't privy to. Was this a surprise? A grand romantic gesture that had somehow gone spectacularly wrong? Mark wasn't usually this secretive about good things. He was more of a, honey, guess what I did kind of guy. Or was it something bad? My mind went to the worst-case scenarios. An emergency? A business crisis? But even then, wouldn't he have called? Sent a text? Something? His phone was off. Mine barely had signal. It felt like being cut off from the world, intentionally or unintentionally, and I hated it. I thought back to the past few weeks. Had anything seemed off? Mark had been working late, that was true. He'd been stressed about a big project at work. But that was normal. He'd been excited about this trip, hadn't he? We'd talked about it for months. A chance to get away, just the two of us. He'd planned everything, or so he said. He'd been the one who suggested this city, this hotel. He said he'd heard good things about it. Had he been lying? The water was starting to cool now, and the initial relaxation was wearing off, replaced by a fresh wave of anxiety. I couldn't stay in the bath forever. I needed to do something. I needed to find out what was going on. I got out of the tub, wrapped myself in one of the ridiculously plush robes hanging on the door, and walked back into the main part of the suite. It was still just as empty, just as silent. I looked around again, this time with a more critical eye. Was there anything here that could give me a clue? Anything out of the ordinary? I started in the living area. The coffee table was bare except for a couple of glossy hotel magazines. The couch and chairs were perfectly arranged. I opened the drawers in the desk. Just stationery, a Bible, the usual hotel stuff. Nothing personal, nothing that belonged to Mark. I moved into the bedroom. I checked the nightstands, empty drawers, the closet, just hangers and an ironing board. No suitcase, no clothes. It was like he had never been here except for that brief moment in the lobby. But he had been here. He'd checked in. He'd given them my name. He'd booked this suite. My eyes fell on the suitcase I had brought. It was still sitting by the door where I'd left it. I hadn't even unpacked. It felt like a temporary visitor's bag in a place that was supposed to be ours for the next week. I walked over to the large windows again. The city lights twinkled below. It was beautiful, impersonal. A million people living their lives, and I was stuck up here, completely isolated, wondering if my husband was okay, if I was okay. I went back to my bag and pulled out my phone. Still no signal. I tried connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi. It required a room number and a name. I typed in the suite number the receptionist had given me and my name. It connected. Finally, a lifeline. My fingers fumbled as I opened my messaging app. I had a few unread messages from friends, things like, "Have fun on your trip," and "Send pics." I couldn't even begin to respond to those. I went straight to Mark's contact. I typed out a message. "Mark, where are you? I'm in the suite. Are you okay? Call me ASAP, please." I hit send. It showed as delivered, but there was no reply. Minutes ticked by. Still nothing. I tried calling him again. It rang this time, but went straight to voicemail. "Hey, you've reached Mark. Leave a message." His normal greeting. Not a crisis message, not an out-of-office message. Just his regular voicemail. I left a message trying to keep my voice steady, failing miserably. "Mark, it's me. I'm really worried. Please call me back as soon as you get this. I don't know what's going on." Next, I tried calling the hotel front desk from the suite phone. The receptionist who answered sounded different from the one in the lobby. Younger, maybe. "Front desk, how can I help you?" "Hi," I said, trying to sound calm. "I'm in the presidential suite 2501. My husband checked us in earlier, but he had to leave suddenly. I was just wondering if you had any information about him, or if he left a message for me." There was a pause. "One moment, please." I could hear typing in the background. Then, "Could I have the name the suite is registered under, please?" "It's registered under Mark and my last name," I said. "He checked in around—" I checked my watch. "Maybe an hour and a half ago?" More typing, another pause. "Ma'am, according to our records, Suite 2501 was checked in under the name Mark, my last name. There is no note or message associated with the reservation." "Okay," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "But you did see him? He was here?" "Yes, ma'am. Mr. My last name checked in personally." "And did he say where he was going? Or when he'd be back?" "I'm afraid I don't have that information, ma'am. He completed the check-in process and then left the lobby." "Did he seem all right?" I asked, feeling foolish even asking. What was she going to say? "Oh, yes, he seemed perfectly fine for someone who was about to abandon his wife. He seemed perfectly normal during the check-in, ma'am," she said politely, but with a tone that suggested this line of questioning was unusual. "Okay. Thank you," I said, and hung up. Normal. He seemed normal. Just like he had when he kissed me goodbye outside the elevator. So the hotel confirmed he checked in, under his name, for this suite. But they had no idea where he went or why. That didn't help at all. It just deepened the mystery. If he was okay, why wasn't he answering his phone? If he wasn't okay, where was he? I paced the length of the suite, from the living room, through the dining area, into the bedroom, past the huge bathroom, and back again. My mind was racing. What was I missing? Was there something I hadn't noticed? A detail? A look? A word? I stopped in the bedroom again. The bed. It was perfectly made. Had anyone even been in here after check-in? Was it possible Mark had just checked in and left immediately without even coming up to the suite? But then, why would the receptionist say, "Your presidential suite awaits, ma'am"? That implied he had arranged for me to come up. I walked over to the dresser. It was a large, ornate piece of furniture. I opened the top drawer. Empty. The next one. Empty. The bottom one. Empty. I pulled the drawers all the way out just to be sure. Nothing hidden behind them. I moved to the other side of the room where there was a small sitting area with 2 chairs and a table. I checked under the cushions. Nothing. I picked up the table lamp, looked under the base. Nothing. This felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad movie. But I was desperate. Maybe there was something in the entryway? I went back to the front door. There was a small console table there. On it sat a hotel directory and a room service menu. I flipped through them quickly. Nothing tucked inside. I checked the drawers in the console table. Empty. I leaned against the door, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I was physically here, in this incredibly luxurious place, but mentally I was miles away, lost in a fog of worry and confusion. It felt surreal. One minute, I was arriving at a fancy hotel for a romantic getaway. The next, I was alone, my husband gone, the suite a gilded cage. I looked at my phone again. Still no reply from Mark, no missed calls, no new messages. It was like he had vanished into thin air. The city lights outside seemed to mock me, so close and yet so unreachable. I felt utterly alone. What was I supposed to do now? Stay here and wait? For how long? What if he didn't come back? What if something terrible had happened? Or worse, what if this was intentional? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Why would he do this? My gaze fell on my suitcase again. Maybe unpacking would help. Give me something to do. A sense of normalcy. I walked over and unzipped it. Inside were clothes for a week of vacation, things I had packed with excitement and anticipation. Sundresses, sandals, a nice outfit for dinner. Looking at them now felt like looking at relics from a different life, a life that existed just a few hours ago, but felt like a lifetime away. I started to take things out, folding them mechanically and placing them in the empty dresser drawers. It was a mindless task, and it gave my brain a chance to churn through the possibilities. Was he hurt? Was he in trouble? Had he gotten cold feet about the trip? Had he met someone? My mind went to dark places, places I didn't want to go. Mark and I had a good marriage, didn't we? We were happy. This couldn't be about us, could it? As I was putting away a t-shirt, my hand brushed against something hard at the bottom of the suitcase. It wasn't part of the packing. I reached in and pulled it out. It was a small, plain envelope. My name was written on the front in Mark's handwriting. My heart leaped into my throat. Finally, a message. A clue. Something. My hands were shaking as I tore it open. My fingers fumbling with the paper. Inside, there was a single folded sheet. It wasn't a letter, not really. It was more like a note, hastily written. The paper was slightly crumpled, like he'd shoved it in there at the last minute. My eyes scanned the words, trying to make sense of them through the blur of my tears and the pounding in my ears. Sarah, it started. Just Sarah. No my dearest or honey, just my name. That felt cold, even before I read the rest. I'm so sorry, I had to go. Something came up, something big. I can't explain it right now, but I need some time. Time away from everything. Please don't try to find me. Don't call anyone. Just wait. I promise I'll be in touch as soon as I can. This isn't about you. It's not about us. I love you. Mark. That was it. A few lines scrawled on a piece of paper. My husband, the man I had just spent the last 24 hours with, the man I was supposed to be on vacation with, had just left. With no explanation beyond something big came up. He left a note in my suitcase. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't call. He just vanished, leaving me alone in a strange hotel room in a city we were supposed to explore together. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the note. I read it again and again, trying to find some hidden meaning, some code, something that made sense. Something big came up. What could possibly be so big that you abandon your wife on a planned vacation with only a cryptic note? Don't try to find me. Why wouldn't I try to find him? Was he in danger? Was he running from something? Or was he running to something? Don't call anyone. That was the part that really chilled me. Why the secrecy? Why isolate me? This isn't about you. It's not about us. He said he loved me. But how could it not be about us when he just disappeared from our life together? It felt like a punch to the gut, a betrayal. Even if he was in trouble, even if something awful had happened, leaving me in the dark, telling me not to look for him, felt like a deliberate act of separation. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the note clutched in my hand. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Relief that he wasn't just gone without a trace, maybe a little. But it was quickly overshadowed by fear, confusion, and a deep, aching hurt. He had lied to me. He had planned this. He must have packed this note before we even left home. He knew he wasn't staying. He let me think everything was normal, let me get excited about our trip, and all the while, he had this planned. The hotel room felt suffocatingly quiet. The city noises from outside seemed distant, unreal. My beautiful sundresses lay folded in the drawer, mocking me. The empty space next to me on the bed was a stark reminder of his absence. What was I supposed to do? His note said, "Wait, don't call anyone, don't try to find him." But how could I just sit here and wait? What if he was in danger? What if he needed help? What if he wasn't coming back? The silence stretched, broken only by my ragged breathing. I felt completely paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at me to call someone, his parents, my parents, the police, to report him missing, to tell someone what had happened. But his note was so specific. Don't call anyone. Was I supposed to trust him? To trust that he knew what he was doing, that he would be okay, that he would contact me? After he had just completely blindsided me like this? It felt impossible. How could I trust someone who had just shattered my reality? But then the other side of my brain kicked in. What if calling someone made things worse? What if he was in some kind of trouble that would be compounded by involving the authorities? What if he was hiding from someone dangerous? His note said, "Something big came up." That could mean anything. I sat there for a long time, the note now crumpled in my fist, weighing the options. Stay silent and wait, as he asked, or break his one instruction and reach out for help or information. Either choice felt fraught with potential disaster. If I waited, I could be leaving him to face something alone, or worse, enabling him to walk away from our life. If I didn't wait, I could be putting him in more danger or pushing him further away if this was some strange, misguided attempt at finding himself or dealing with a personal crisis. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea what was at the bottom. And he had pushed me there. What would you have done in that moment? Faced with a note like that, from the person you love most, telling you not to look for them, not to tell anyone, and giving you no real explanation? Let me know below. My phone was on the nightstand. I stared at it, my finger hovering over the screen. I could call his mom. She'd be worried sick if she knew he was gone, or my best friend Sarah. She'd know what to do. She always did. But the words, "don't call anyone," seemed to burn into my mind. This wasn't a game. It wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something serious. Serious enough for him to disappear. Serious enough for him to lie to me for days, maybe weeks, leading up to this. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I stumbled into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were red and puffy, my hair a mess. I looked like a stranger. This whole situation felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I went back to the bed and picked up the note again. I smoothed it out, reading it slowly, trying to glean any new information. Something came up, something big. Was it work-related? Financial? Was he in trouble with the law? Was he sick? My mind raced through every terrible possibility. He said, "I love you." Was that true? Or was it just something he wrote to soften the blow, to keep me from panicking, to keep me from looking for him? The thought that he might not love me, that this might somehow be about ending our marriage, was almost unbearable. We had been together for 10 years, married for 7. We had built a life together. We talked about having kids, about buying a house upstate. All of that felt like ash in my mouth now. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what my next move was. Staying in this hotel room, waiting, felt wrong. It felt passive. But going out, trying to find him, also felt wrong, given his instruction. And involving other people felt like breaking a fragile, invisible rule that he had set, a rule I didn't understand the consequences of breaking. I folded the note carefully and put it back in the envelope. I needed to keep it safe. It was the only link I had to him, the only explanation, however inadequate, for his disappearance. The clock on the nightstand showed it was late afternoon. The day had slipped away while I was lost in this personal twilight zone. I hadn't eaten since the plane. My stomach ached, but I had no appetite. I knew I couldn't stay in this room forever. I had to decide something, and I had to decide it soon. The longer I waited, the more time passed, the further away he could get, or the deeper into trouble he could fall, or the more entrenched he could become in whatever new life he was building without me. That last thought was the one that twisted the knife the deepest. The idea that this wasn't a temporary problem, but a permanent departure. I stood up, my legs shaky. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city lights starting to twinkle on. It was beautiful, vibrant, full of people living their lives. And here I was, completely alone, my life suddenly put on hold by a mystery I didn't understand. I had to make a choice. A difficult, potentially life-altering choice based on a few cryptic lines of text from the man who was supposed to be my partner. Part of me wanted to scream, to rage, to throw things. Part of me just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry until I disappeared too. But another part, a stubborn, determined part, knew I had to do something. I couldn't just wait, not knowing, not understanding. He asked me not to look for him. But he didn't tell me I couldn't try to understand why. I had to understand. The why, not the where, not the how he got there, but the reason he felt he had to go, and why he sent me here. This luxurious, empty box in the sky. It felt like a clue, or a cage, maybe both. I stood there by the window for a long time, watching the city lights come alive, each one a tiny point of light in a vast, indifferent grid. My life, my marriage, felt like it had just been erased from that grid. But there had to be lines connecting things, reasons behind the pattern. I just needed to find them. My phone felt heavy in my hand. His message was still on the screen, the words burning themselves into my memory. Don't look for me. Okay. I wouldn't. Not in the traditional sense, but understanding the why didn't feel like looking for him. It felt like looking at the situation, at the reasons, at the context. Where do you even start when your husband vanishes and sends you to a presidential suite? The suite itself? Was there something hidden here? A safe? Papers? I did a quick sweep, not a frantic search, more like just looking, opening drawers, checking closets. It felt invasive, even in his absence, like I was already crossing a line he'd implicitly drawn. But he'd drawn the first line, hadn't he? A mile wide, right through the middle of our life. There was nothing obvious. Just ridiculously expensive furniture, fluffy robes, and minibar items I couldn't fathom paying for. It was clean, impersonal luxury. A temporary space, not a place where secrets were kept, it seemed. Or maybe I just didn't know where to look. My gaze fell on the small desk in the corner of the living area. No laptop, no briefcase, nothing that screamed business trip. He must have taken everything with him. Of course he would have. He planned this. He didn't just walk out the door on a whim. This was deliberate. That thought was cold comfort. What about his digital life? That felt like the most likely place to find answers these days. His phone? He had it. His laptop? He took it. But what about cloud accounts? Email? Shared drives? We didn't have a shared computer. We each had our own. But we shared passwords for some things, like streaming services or our joint bank account. Nothing sensitive. Or so I thought. My own laptop was still in my carry-on bag. I pulled it out, my fingers fumbling with the zipper. Plugging it in, waiting for it to boot up, felt agonizingly slow. Every second that passed felt like time slipping away, time he was using to, what? Further his escape? Solidify his new reality? I opened the browser. My mind raced through possibilities. His work email? I knew the domain, but not his password. Our personal email? We used different providers, and I didn't know his password. What about accounts he might use for travel? Or finance? Then I remembered something. He had a separate laptop for work sometimes, one that stayed at home. It was older, less powerful than his main one, but he kept it around for certain software or files. Had he taken that one too? Or was it still at the house? It felt like a lifetime ago I'd been in our house. No, that wouldn't help me. Here. I needed something accessible from this location. What about his online banking? We had a joint account, but he also had separate business accounts. I didn't have access to those. Our joint account wouldn't tell me why he left, just maybe how much he had access to, or where money was going. That felt too much like tracking him financially, which felt dangerously close to looking for him. Okay, re-strategize. Why this suite? Why this city? It had to be connected to something. His work? A client? A project? He traveled for work sometimes, but usually I knew about it. This trip had been different from the start. The secrecy, the vagueness. Could I try calling his office? Pretend I needed something? That felt like lying, and I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Besides, what could I even ask? Hi, my husband disappeared and sent me to a fancy hotel. Any idea why? They'd think I was crazy. I sat down at the desk, the leather chair creaking slightly. My laptop screen glowed in the dimming light of the suite. I felt a surge of determination mixed with absolute dread. I had to try something. I decided to start with something seemingly innocuous, his LinkedIn profile. Maybe there would be a clue there. A recent connection? A post about a new project or client? It felt like a long shot, but it was a starting point that didn't involve hacking into his private accounts. I searched for his name. There he was. His professional photo smiled back at me, a stranger's smile now. I scrolled through his recent activity. Nothing unusual. Articles shared about industry trends, congratulating a colleague on a promotion. It was all normal, frustratingly normal. What else? His work website? Maybe there was information about current projects. I navigated to his company's site, found the projects section, scanned the list. Nothing jumped out. No project listed in this city, or related to anything that seemed out of the ordinary for his field. I leaned back in the chair, a sigh escaping my lips. This was harder than I thought. It felt like trying to find a single grain of sand on an endless beach. And the beach was shifting under my feet. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to clear my head. Think logically. He sent me here, to this specific place. Why? Was it a message in itself? Was it a place of safety? Or was it connected to whatever he was doing? Maybe the hotel was the clue. Not the room itself, but the establishment. Did his company have a contract here? Was it a known meeting spot? I opened a new tab and searched for the hotel's name, adding his company's name. The results were just travel sites, reviews, news about the hotel itself. Nothing about corporate partnerships or specific clients staying here. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. It was like hitting a brick wall everywhere I turned. He had covered his tracks, or there were no tracks to find in the first place. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe he just needed space, and this was his way of giving me that, while also ensuring I was safe and comfortable. But that didn't explain the cryptic message, the urgency, the feeling of finality. No, this was more than needing space. This was something else. Something big enough to make him abandon his life, his wife, everything we had built. I looked at my laptop screen again. What was I missing? What stone was left unturned? Digital footprint. That was it, beyond the professional facade. What about his online presence outside of work? Social media? We weren't big social media users, just the occasional photo shared with friends and family. Nothing controversial. I hesitated. Did I dare try to access his personal email? It felt like a violation, a betrayal of trust. But hadn't he already betrayed my trust? By leaving? By keeping secrets? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It felt wrong. But the alternative was doing nothing, waiting in this gilded cage, and that felt even worse. I had to understand. For my own sanity, if nothing else. I took a deep breath and typed in the address for his email provider. The login screen stared back at me, a silent challenge. I knew his username, of course, but the password. I tried the usual suspects. Our anniversary date, our first pet's name, his mother's maiden name, all the cliché security questions. None of them worked. Of course not. He was smarter than that. Or maybe he'd changed it recently. The thought struck me. Had he been planning this for a while? Changing passwords? Covering his tracks? The idea made my stomach clench. I slumped back in the chair, defeated. The digital world, usually a place of endless information, felt like a fortress I couldn't breach. And I was alone, miles from home, with no one to turn to, no one to ask for help. Just the silence of this overly large suite and the mystery of a vanishing husband. The night stretched ahead, long and empty, filled only with questions I couldn't answer. The suite was silent when I woke up. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The opulence felt suffocating now, a cruel joke. Last night, the defeat of not being able to access David's email had settled deep in my bones. I'd barely slept, my mind replaying every conversation, every look, every moment leading up to this trip. Had I missed something? Was there a sign I'd ignored? The questions circled endlessly, like vultures. I couldn't stay in here. Sitting in this gilded cage, waiting for answers that weren't coming to me, felt like giving up. I had to go out, had to do something. Maybe seeing the conference, seeing the people he was supposed to be with would offer a clue. Or maybe just being out in the world, away from the oppressive silence of the suite, would help me think. I got dressed, choosing something unassuming. Not the kind of outfit I'd wear to a fancy conference reception, but something that would let me blend in, observe. I felt like I was preparing for a stakeout, not trying to find my missing husband. The thought was absurd, but the feeling was real. Downstairs, the lobby was busy with morning activity. Business people in suits, tourists with maps. I avoided the main reception desk. I wasn't ready to face the smiling receptionist again. Not yet. I needed information, not more polite confusion. I found the signs directing attendees to the conference floors. Taking the elevator up, my stomach tightened. What would I find? Would his colleagues be looking for him? Would someone ask me where he was? How much did anyone else know? The conference level was a hive of activity. People milled around outside session rooms, chatting, networking. There were booths set up by different companies, displaying brochures and tech gadgets. It was exactly the kind of environment David thrived in. But he wasn't here. I walked slowly, trying to look casual, like I belonged. I scanned faces, hoping to spot someone I recognized from a company photo or an awards dinner. No luck. Everyone was a stranger. I found the registration area, a long table with several people checking names off lists, handing out badges and tote bags. This seemed like the place to start. I approached the least busy person, a young woman with a name tag that said, "Volunteer." "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm looking for David Miller. He's supposed to be attending this conference." The volunteer smiled brightly. "Okay, let me just check the list. David Miller, you said?" She ran her finger down a printed sheet. I see a David Miller registered. Did he check in yet?" My heart gave a little jump. Registered. Okay, that was something. "I'm not sure," I said, trying to sound vague. "He was traveling separately. I just wanted to confirm he arrived." She typed something into a laptop. "It says here his registration is complete, but it doesn't show that his badge has been picked up, and his session attendance hasn't been logged." She looked up, a hint of confusion replacing the bright smile. "Are you sure he was planning to attend today?" "Yes, absolutely," I said quickly. Too quickly? "He wouldn't miss it. Is there any way to tell if he picked up any materials, or if he maybe checked in with someone else?" She shook her head. "The badge is required for everything. If he didn't pick it up, he wouldn't have access to the sessions or the exhibit hall. Maybe try checking at the main hotel desk. Sometimes people leave messages there. Right, yes, thank you, I mumbled, feeling a new wave of unease. He was registered, but he hadn't shown up here. He hadn't picked up his badge, the basic requirement for attending. This wasn't a simple delay or a missed flight. This was something else. I walked away from the registration desk, the noise of the conference fading around me. He was supposed to be here. His name was on the list. But he wasn't participating. It was like he'd laid the groundwork, made it look like he was coming, but then didn't follow through. Where was he? If he wasn't here, where could he possibly be? And why the elaborate setup with the presidential suite if he wasn't even going to attend the conference? It made no sense. None of it made any sense. I wandered back towards the elevators, my mind racing. The hotel, the suite. It was supposed to be part of the plan, this plan. But he wasn't here to use it. Or was he? Had he been here and gone? The volunteer said he hadn't picked up his badge, hadn't attended sessions. That seemed pretty definitive. I needed to think. I needed to try another angle. The digital world had failed me last night, but maybe I was looking in the wrong place. Email was too personal, too locked down. What about something more practical, like finances? I went back up to the suite. The quiet felt heavy again, but this time I had a purpose. I went straight to the desk, pulled out my laptop, accessing our joint bank accounts and credit cards. I knew the logins for those. We were always open about finances, shared everything. Or so I thought. Logging in felt less like an invasion and more like a necessity now. I navigated to the recent transactions, scrolling through the usual charges, groceries, gas, utility bills, a few online purchases. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first glance. Then I looked at the dates. The charges continued right up until a couple of days before he was supposed to leave for this trip. And then, nothing unusual until about 2 days ago. A rental car charge? In Arizona? I blinked, scrolling back up. Yes, a rental car. Picked up at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport. 2 days ago. That was the same day he was supposed to arrive here, in Chicago. My breath caught in my throat. Arizona? Phoenix? What in the world was he doing in Phoenix? There was no conference in Phoenix, no business trip he'd mentioned, no family there, no reason at all to be in Phoenix. I checked the dates again. Picked up 2 days ago, the day he was scheduled to arrive in Chicago. The charge was significant, for a week-long rental. A week? This conference was only 3 days. My hands started to shake. It wasn't just that he wasn't here. It was that he was somewhere else, somewhere completely unexpected. And he'd gone there instead of coming here, instead of coming to the presidential suite he'd booked, instead of attending the conference he was registered for. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The suite, the trip, the whole story about the conference. It was all a cover, a distraction. While I was flying to Chicago, expecting to join him in this fancy hotel, he was flying somewhere else entirely. To Phoenix. Why? Why would he do that? What was in Phoenix that was more important than his work, more important than coming here? More important than telling me the truth? The betrayal was a cold, sharp pain in my chest. He hadn't just gone missing. He had actively lied to me. He had planned this. He had gone to Phoenix. But for what? But for what? That question echoed in my head, drowning out everything else. What was so important in Phoenix that he would concoct this elaborate lie, send me halfway across the country to an empty luxury suite while he went somewhere else entirely? The presidential suite suddenly felt like a gilded cage, a cruel mockery of what I thought this trip was supposed to be. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was a deep, sickening sense of betrayal. He hadn't just missed his flight or gotten delayed. He had chosen to go to Phoenix. He had planned this deception. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the receipt. I forced myself to take a deep breath, then another. Panic wasn't going to help. I needed to think. He was in Phoenix. He'd rented a car for a week. That was longer than the conference was supposed to be, longer than I was supposed to be here. Okay. Deep breaths. What do I know? I know he flew somewhere else. I know it was Phoenix. I know he rented a car there 2 days ago, the day he was supposed to arrive here. I know this whole Chicago trip was a lie. What don't I know? I don't know why he's in Phoenix. I don't know who he's with, if anyone. I don't know where he's staying. I don't know what he's doing. My first instinct was to call him, demand an explanation. But what good would that do? He'd clearly gone to great lengths to hide this. Would he suddenly tell me the truth now that I'd stumbled onto a single piece of evidence? Probably not. He'd probably just lie again. Or worse, he'd make up some story about a last-minute business emergency, something plausible but untrue, and I'd be left trying to figure out if that was another lie on top of the first ones. No, calling him wasn't the answer. Not yet. I needed more information. I needed to understand why. I looked at the car rental receipt again. It had the name of the rental company. Could I call them? Would they tell me anything? Probably not, privacy and all that. But maybe I could try. I pulled out my phone, my fingers fumbling as I searched for the rental company's number in Phoenix. I found a general customer service line. I dialed it, my heart pounding in my chest. A chipper voice answered, "Thank you for calling, rental company name. How can I help you today?" "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It sounded shaky even to me. "I'm calling about a rental agreement. My husband's name, rented a car from your Phoenix location a couple of days ago. I have a question about the rental." "Okay, ma'am, I can look that up for you. Do you have the rental agreement number?" I didn't. The receipt just had a confirmation number, not the full agreement number. "No, I don't have the agreement number. I just have the confirmation number and his name, and the date he picked it up." Okay. One moment please while I try to locate that." The hold music was agonizingly cheerful. Every second felt like an hour. What was I even hoping to find out? Where he picked up the car? The type of car? Would they tell me anything? It felt like a long shot. After what felt like an eternity, the voice came back. "Ma'am, I'm seeing a rental agreement under that name, picked up on the date you mentioned from our Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport location. Is there something specific you needed assistance with regarding this rental?" Sky Harbor Airport. Okay, that confirmed he flew directly into Phoenix, not just driving through. He flew there. "Yes," I said, my voice still tight. I was just wondering if there was an additional driver listed on the agreement." There was a pause. A longer pause this time. "Ma'am, I'm afraid I can't provide specific details about the rental agreement to anyone other than the primary renter for privacy reasons." My stomach sank. Of course, privacy. "Okay, I understand," I said, trying not to sound defeated. Could you just confirm the return date on the agreement?" Another pause. "Again, ma'am, I'm not authorized to disclose details of the rental agreement to parties not listed on the contract." It was a dead end. A complete dead end. I thanked her and hung up, the phone feeling heavy in my hand. They wouldn't tell me anything. Not who he was with, not how long the rental was for, nothing. All I got was confirmation that yes, he was in Phoenix, and yes, he rented a car from the airport. Okay, strike one. What else? Phoenix. What did I know about Phoenix? Nothing. I'd never been there. Did he have friends there? Family? Work contacts? I racked my brain. His family was all back east, none in Arizona. His work was based here in Chicago or back home. Did he have clients there? Maybe. It was possible, but he'd never mentioned any significant clients in Phoenix. I opened my laptop. Maybe the internet could tell me something. I started searching. Husband's name, Phoenix. Husband's name, Arizona. Nothing interesting came up. Just his LinkedIn profile, general stuff about his company, articles about the industry that he sometimes appeared in. Nothing connecting him to Phoenix. I tried searching for businesses or organizations he might be involved with, maybe something personal, a hobby, a charity. Again, nothing in Phoenix. The clock on the wall seemed to mock me. Hours were ticking by. Hours that he had been in Phoenix. Doing what? While I was here, alone in this ridiculously large suite, feeling like the world's biggest fool. What could be in Phoenix that was worth this level of deception? It had to be something significant, something he couldn't tell me about. My mind started spinning, conjuring up possibilities, each one more painful than the last. Was it another woman? The thought was a physical blow. Was he having an affair? Was he meeting someone in Phoenix? Was that why he needed a week-long car rental? To spend time with them? The idea was devastating, but it didn't quite fit the elaborate setup, the conference, the presidential suite, the specific dates. If it was just an affair, why not just say he had a last-minute trip, a smaller conference somewhere else? Why all this? Unless the affair was with someone important? Someone he couldn't risk being seen with? Or maybe it wasn't an affair. Maybe it was something else entirely, something secret, something dangerous. My imagination was running wild, fueled by fear and the gnawing pain of betrayal. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I walked over to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, beautiful and indifferent. This city, this hotel, this suite, it was all part of the lie. Every luxurious detail now felt tainted. The fresh flowers, the expensive artwork, the view. It was all designed to distract me, to keep me occupied while he was miles away, living a completely different life that he had hidden from me. I needed to figure this out. I couldn't just sit here and wait for him to show up, whenever that might be, with whatever new lie he had prepared. I needed to know what he was doing in Phoenix. I needed to understand the depth of this deception. And I needed to decide what I was going to do about it. The man I thought I knew, the man I loved, the man I had built my life with, had just revealed a hidden side I never could have imagined. And I didn't know if I could ever trust him again. I couldn't just stand there, paralyzed by fear and hurt. That wasn't me. I might have been blindsided, but I wasn't helpless. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the trembling in my hands. Okay, Chicago. Okay, presidential suite. Okay, blatant calculated lie. What was I going to do about it? My first thought was the staff. The receptionist, the concierge who showed me up, they clearly knew I was coming and knew the situation, or at least part of it. Could I get anything out of them? I walked over to the suite's phone and picked up the receiver. My fingers hovered over the button for the front desk. What would I even ask? Hi, just calling to see why my husband booked this elaborate setup for me while he's actually in Phoenix? No, that wouldn't work. Too direct, too accusatory. It would put them on guard instantly. Maybe I could play dumb, or just slightly confused. Hi, yes, this is Mrs., my last name, in the presidential suite. I just wanted to check if my husband left any messages for me, or perhaps an itinerary. He mentioned he might be delayed, but I wasn't sure of the specifics. It sounded plausible enough, like a slightly anxious wife, not a suspicious detective. I pressed the button. A polite voice answered almost immediately. Front desk, how may I help you? Yes, hi, this is Mrs., my last name in the presidential suite, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and natural. I was just calling to see if my husband, Mr., my husband's first name, my last name, left any messages for me? Or if you happen to know when he's expected back. There was a slight pause, just a fraction of a second, but I felt it. It felt like a carefully practiced moment of hesitation. Then the voice was back, smooth and professional. One moment, please, Mrs., my last name. Let me check the messages for your suite. I held my breath, listening to the faint sound of keyboard clicks on the other end. It felt like an eternity. Finally, the voice returned. No, Mrs., my last name. It appears there are no messages currently for your suite, and we don't have an estimated time of arrival listed for Mr., my husband's first name. He didn't happen to mention to you when he might be returning? No, not exactly, I said, trying to sound casually disappointed. He was a little vague, just thought I'd check. Thank you anyway. My pleasure, Mrs., my last name. Please don't hesitate to call if you need anything at all. Enjoy your stay. Thank you, I replied, and gently hung up the phone. It was useless. They were either completely in the dark, which seemed unlikely given the circumstances, or they were incredibly well coached. Their response felt too smooth, too prepared. No estimated time of arrival listed felt like a deliberate deflection. He hadn't checked in here, so of course they wouldn't have an arrival time for this hotel, but they didn't say that. They just said they didn't have one listed. It was a subtle difference, but it felt significant. Okay, so the official channels were a dead end. What else could I do? I looked around the suite. Had he been here at all before I arrived? The room was immaculate, not a single personal item of his anywhere. Of course not. He was never meant to be here. This was just the elaborate stage dressing for my side of the lie. But wait, had he left anything behind by accident? Something he might have brought with him from home before heading to Phoenix? I started searching the room. Not like a frantic ransacking, but a careful, methodical search. I checked the desk drawers, the bedside tables, even the bathroom vanity, just in case. Nothing. It was like he had been a ghost, or rather, like he had never been here in the first place. Then I remembered his laptop bag. He always traveled with it. It was usually the last thing he packed. Had he taken it to Phoenix? Or was it possible he had left it at home? No, he needed it for his supposed business trip. What about his phone? He had called me earlier, hadn't he? From the car? He must have it with him. Wait, the email. The confirmation email the receptionist had mentioned. That was the key, wasn't it? She had said he forwarded it to me. But I hadn't received any such email. I pulled out my own phone. I checked my email inbox, spam folder, trash. Nothing from him about this suite or this trip today. The last email from him was a mundane work-related forward from yesterday. This was another layer of the lie. He hadn't forwarded me the confirmation. The receptionist had either been mistaken or she was part of the act, instructed to say that to make it sound like I was fully in the loop. But if the hotel had my name and knew I was coming, how did they get it? Did he call them and give them my details? Or did he forward the confirmation to them directly? And why? To make sure they were ready for me? It felt less like a thoughtful gesture and more like setting the final piece of the trap. I sat down on the edge of the enormous plush bed, feeling a fresh wave of nausea. The lie was so intricate, so detailed. The presidential suite, the prepared staff, the missing email. It was all designed to keep me here, occupied, unsuspecting, while he was somewhere else, doing something he clearly didn't want me to know about. Phoenix. That was the constant. The lie was about Chicago, but the truth, or at least a part of it, was in Phoenix. What was so important in Phoenix that he had to construct this elaborate deception? Was it another woman? That was the immediate, gut-wrenching fear. The classic scenario. A secret lover, a weekend getaway disguised as a business trip. But the scale of this lie? A presidential suite? For me? As a distraction? It felt like overkill for just a simple affair. Unless it wasn't simple. Unless it was serious. Or was it something else entirely? Something business-related but illicit? Something dangerous? My mind spun with possibilities, each one darker than the last. He was so careful, so meticulous in his everyday life. To pull off something like this, it required planning, resources, maybe even help from others, like the hotel staff seemed to be providing. I couldn't just sit here and speculate. I had to find out more. I needed concrete information about Phoenix. I thought about his habits, his work, his contacts. Was there anything I could access? His laptop was likely with him, his phone too. But what about his office computer? Or maybe there was something on our shared home computer. No, that felt too far away, too complicated. I was here, in Chicago, in this suite that was supposed to be my opulent cage. The information I needed might be closer than I thought. I stood up, my legs feeling unsteady. I walked back to the desk. If he had booked this suite, there had to be a record of it. A booking reference, a confirmation number. Something the hotel staff would have used. The receptionist had mentioned the confirmation. It must exist somewhere in their system. Could I trick the staff into giving me the booking details? Maybe call back and say I needed the confirmation number for my expense report? No, that felt weak. And they already seemed cagey. I looked at my phone again. What if I tried a different approach? What if I tried to find information about him in Phoenix? His company had offices there, I knew that much. Was there anything in the news? Anything unusual happening in Phoenix that might relate to his work? I opened a web browser on my phone and started typing. I searched for his company name and Phoenix. Then I tried his name and Phoenix. Then I tried searching for news related to his industry in Phoenix over the last few days. Nothing immediately jumped out, just standard business news, press releases. I felt a pang of frustration. It was like searching in the dark. I had the location, Phoenix, but I had no idea what I was looking for. A person? A deal? A meeting? Something illegal? I closed the browser, feeling defeated. The luxurious silence of the suite felt oppressive. Every expensive object, every plush cushion felt like a mocking symbol of his deception. He had gone to such lengths to create this illusion, this opulent decoy. Why? What was he hiding that was so important? The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but it was starting to mix with anger. A righteous anger. He had lied to me, betrayed my trust, made a fool of me. And he had done it with such elaborate care. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I didn't know what was happening in Phoenix, but I was going to find out. I wasn't going to wait here, passively, in his gilded cage. I was going to take control. The question was, how? I needed a plan, a way to get real answers, not just evasive politeness from hotel staff or vague search results. The truth was out there, and I was going to uncover it, no matter how painful it might be. The anger was a sharp, clean thing compared to the murky fear. It gave me focus. I wasn't going to wait around like a prize in a cage. I needed information, real information, and I needed it now. My first thought was to call someone, a friend, a lawyer, anyone who might know something. But who? Who could I trust with this? My life had become so intertwined with his. His circle was his circle, and mine felt distant, almost forgotten in the lavish bubble we lived in. No, I had to do this myself. My phone felt heavy in my hand. I scrolled through contacts, my heart pounding. Should I call him? Demand he tell me? What if he just lied again? What if he was in danger? The fear clawed back in. But what if I was in danger, just by being here, connected to whatever he was doing? I decided against calling him directly. Not yet. I needed leverage, something more than just my suspicion. I went back to the search history, the flight details, the hotel name, Phoenix. It wasn't much, but it was concrete. I started searching for news related to that hotel, to Phoenix business deals, anything that felt out of the ordinary. Hours blurred. The sun set, casting long shadows across the ridiculously expensive furniture. My eyes burned from staring at the screen. Nothing. Just standard business news, local events, weather reports. It was maddening. The digital trail was cold, or expertly hidden. Then I thought about the other things. The hushed phone calls, the late nights, the stress lines around his eyes I had dismissed as work pressure. It all clicked into place, a horrifying puzzle forming in my mind. This wasn't just a secret trip. This was something big, something he was terrified I would find out. Sleep was impossible. I paced the suite, the silence amplifying the turmoil in my head. By morning, my resolve had hardened into something cold and brittle. I wasn't going to wait for him to come back and offer another polished lie. I was going to force the issue. I sent him a text. Simple. Direct. We need to talk, now, about Phoenix. The 3 dots appeared instantly, then vanished. No reply. My stomach twisted. Had I pushed too hard? Was he okay? Or was he just ignoring me? The waiting was unbearable. I considered booking a flight myself, just showing up in Phoenix, but that felt reckless, maybe even dangerous, given the vague sense of menace I was starting to feel around this whole situation. Finally, late that afternoon, my phone rang. His name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hey, he said, his voice tight, strained. Don't hey me, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my efforts to keep it steady. What is going on? What are you doing in Phoenix? Why are you lying to me? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear background noise, traffic maybe, or just the general hum of a city. Look, he started, I can explain, but not over the phone. I'm on my way back. I'll be there tonight. Tonight isn't good enough, I pushed. I've been here alone for 2 days, piecing together crumbs of information and terrifying myself. I deserve to know, now. Another pause. Deeper this time. I could almost feel him making a decision on the other end of the line. Okay, he finally said, his voice low, defeated. Okay, you're right. You deserve to know. And then he told me. Not everything, not at first, but enough to shatter the gilded cage completely. It wasn't another woman or a surprise, it was money. A massive amount of it. A bad investment years ago, something he'd been trying to manage, to keep afloat, to fix, without me ever knowing the true scale of the problem. The luxury, the lifestyle. It wasn't just success. It was a desperate performance, a way to convince the world, and maybe himself, that he was still on top while secretly drowning in debt. Phoenix was where he was meeting with the people he owed. People, he admitted, who weren't exactly patient or forgiving. It was a last-ditch effort to make a deal, to buy time, to keep everything from collapsing. My head reeled. The betrayal wasn't what I expected, but it cut just as deep. He hadn't been hiding an affair. He'd been hiding our potential ruin, and doing it by building a life based on a lie. He said he did it to protect me, that he didn't want me to worry, that he thought he could fix it before I ever knew. But the protection felt like being kept in the dark, like my ability to handle reality was underestimated. The conversation went on for a long time. He confessed more details, the risks he'd taken, the sleepless nights, the constant fear of exposure. He sounded broken, exhausted. And I listened, a strange mix of anger, hurt, and a twisted kind of pity swirling inside me. He arrived back late that night, looking like a ghost of the confident man I knew. We talked for hours, face to face this time, the truth laid bare between us like a chasm. It wasn't a clean ending, not a simple, he lied, I left scenario. It was messy, complicated, filled with years of shared history and the rubble of shattered trust. I had a decision to make. A monumental, life-altering decision. Could I rebuild with him? Could I trust him again, knowing the depth of his deception? Could I live with the potential consequences of his actions, which were now, by extension, my potential consequences too? Or did I need to walk away, salvage myself from the wreckage, and start over alone? It felt like standing at a fork in the road, one path leading into uncertain, potentially dangerous territory with him, the other into a lonely, but perhaps safer future without him. It was the hardest decision I've ever faced. What would you have done in my place? Let me know below. Ultimately, the path I chose wasn't easy. It involved difficult conversations, professional help, and a long, slow process of figuring out what was salvageable, both in the relationship and in my own sense of self. The immediate aftermath was chaotic and painful, nothing like the serene luxury of the suite. There were financial realities to face, trust to rebuild brick by agonizing brick, and the constant ghost of the lie hanging over us. Looking back now, from a distance, I can see the whole picture more clearly. The journey wasn't just about uncovering a secret. It was about uncovering my own strength. I learned that the most beautiful things can sometimes hide the ugliest truths, and that trust, once broken, leaves scars that may never fully disappear. But I also learned that I am more resilient than I ever imagined. I wasn't just the woman in the gilded cage. I was the woman who found the key, who chose her path, and who faced the truth, no matter how painful it was. It changed me fundamentally. I see the world differently now, with a healthy dose of skepticism, but also with a deeper appreciation for genuine honesty and vulnerability. The luxury is gone, replaced by something far more valuable: my own agency, and the quiet confidence of knowing I can handle whatever comes my way. The story of the gilded cage wasn't about being trapped. It was about breaking free.